Welcome to the presentation on the stages of the assessment cycle. I hope you've enjoyed learning about the previous steps in the assessment cycle, including establishing objectives, creating and mapping programming to objectives, and selecting and designing instruments. Now, we will discuss an important aspect of assessment that helps us make more informed decisions about our programming or interventions. If you're just joining us, we're glad that you're interested in learning more about this important stage in the assessment cycle. Let's get started. First, we want to think about where implementation fidelity fits into the larger process of assessment. As shown here with the gold star, we can see that implementation fidelity comes after we select or design our assessment instruments. We also notice that implementation fidelity is often co-occurring with collecting information. As we will see shortly, these two stages in the assessment cycle often occur concurrently because implementation fidelity involves collecting a specific kind of data during your programming or intervention. Now that we understand where implementation fidelity fits into the assessment process, let's talk about what we mean when we say implementation fidelity. Often we describe implementation fidelity as a way to assess the degree to which program leaders or facilitators deliver an intervention completely and according to protocol. Another way to think about implementation fidelity is by considering its use. We use implementation fidelity to determine how well a program or intervention is being implemented or delivered compared to the original or intended implementation or delivery. That is, how and to what extent does the delivered programming differ from the planned programming? How and to what extent does the program that students actually received differ from the program on paper? It's important that we understand the answers to these questions, because if we can't answer these questions, then we do not know what programming we're actually assessing and making inferences about. Is it the planned programming, or is it something else? Given implementation fidelity can help us understand how and to what degree the delivered programming differs from the intended programming, how do we assess implementation fidelity? There are 5 components to implementation fidelity. These include program differentiation, adherence, quality, exposure, and responsiveness. All are basically what they sound like. The components are fairly intuitive once you think through them. Let's start by considering the first component, program differentiation. Program differentiation describes the specific features associated with each program or intervention. More specifically, program differentiation represents material or concepts that are covered in your program. We create a list of specific program features or opportunities to learn that we want included in our program, and that's what makes up our program differentiation. We can also think of program differentiation as the things that students are doing or experiencing during the programming that will help them achieve the intended program outcomes or objectives. For example, let's say we have an alcohol early intervention program that we refer students to as a result of experiencing this program. Students will drink 3 fewer drinks on average each week. As part of the program, students are supposed to complete a drinking log. Then, program facilitators are supposed to review the drinking log with the students to increase their self-awareness of their own alcohol use. Thus, program differentiation for this aspect of the alcohol early intervention program might include reviewing drinking log with the student and engaging them in a discussion that will increase their drinking self-awareness. Thus, when collecting implementation fidelity data, we would audit live sessions with students or review videotaped sessions to determine whether program facilitators are in fact reviewing the drinking log with the student and engaging them in a discussion that will increase their drinking self-awareness. Overall, program differentiation makes the program crystal clear to all those involved because it details the specific aspects or opportunities to learn that should be included in the program. Adherence is the extent to which specific program features or aspects are delivered as prescribed or as intended. Were all of the specific features or aspects of your program that you laid out during program differentiation actually delivered to the students during your program? Did students have an opportunity to learn each specific feature of your program? To assess adherence, we take the list of specific program features or opportunities to learn that makes up our program differentiation, and we indicate whether each one was implemented or not by simply answering yes or no. If a program feature or aspect was not implemented, then students were not given an opportunity to learn that material or that concept. To go back to our alcohol early intervention example, we would ask ourselves, did the facilitator actually review the drinking log with the student? Yes or no? Did the facilitator engage the student in a discussion about drinking self-awareness? Yes or no? Quality is essentially what it sounds like. How well was each of the specific program features delivered? The quality component often speaks to implementer enthusiasm, leader preparedness, and facilitator attitude toward program and material. This is important because if the facilitator is delivering all of the intended program features or aspects, but is doing so with very poor quality, then we might not expect this information to be well received by students. To assess quality, we focus on those specific program features or aspects that were actually implemented. That is, those features for which you indicated yes to the adherence question. When we rate the quality of delivery or implementation, we usually use a Likert scale ranging from 1, meaning low or confusing quality, to 5, meaning high or clear quality. To go back to our alcohol early intervention example, we would ask ourselves, when the facilitator reviewed the drinking log with the student, did they do so in a low quality manner, in a confusing or unenthusiastic way, or did they do so in a high quality manner, in a way that was clear and enthusiastic? We would rate the quality of the facilitator's review of the drinking log on a scale of 1 to 5. Exposure can indicate 3 different but very similar things. First, it can indicate the number of program features or aspects implemented. Second, it can indicate the length of each feature. And third, it can indicate the frequency with which program features were implemented. Exposure tells us the actual duration of each program feature and how many students experience the various program features. This is important because if a feature or aspect of your program was intended to last 30 minutes, but actually only lasted 20 minutes, it is likely that important information was left out or rushed through too quickly. To assess exposure, we record the actual duration of the program feature or aspect and compare that to the intended duration of that program feature. We can also record the number of attendees at the program and compare that to the intended number of students that were supposed to attend the program. To apply duration to our alcohol early intervention example, we would ask ourselves, did the review and discussion of the student's alcohol log actually last as long as it was supposed to? The last, but certainly not the least component of implementation fidelity is responsiveness. Responsiveness is exactly what it sounds like. It's an indication of participant responsiveness to each of the program features or aspects. This can be conceptualized as students' perceived participation, engagement, and enthusiasm during the programming. To assess responsiveness, we observe the students as they're experiencing the programming, and we rate their perceived level of responsiveness on a Likert-type scale, usually from low to high. So 1 would represent low responsiveness, 3 might represent medium responsiveness, and 5 might represent high responsiveness. To apply responsiveness to our alcohol early intervention example, we would ask ourselves, on a scale of 1 meaning low responsiveness to 5 meaning high responsiveness, how responsive do students seem to be while the program facilitator was reviewing their alcohol drinking log with them? How engaged or enthusiastic did students seem to be while the facilitator reviewed and discussed their alcohol drinking log? Now that we've discussed the 5 components of implementation fidelity in more depth and provided examples of each component, we will look at an example of an implementation fidelity checklist. Recall our previous examples concerning an alcohol early intervention program. Now the checklist you are seeing is an example checklist that aligns with that example. The implementation fidelity checklist is what we use to record all of the implementation fidelity data that we gather. In other words, the checklist is where we record our answers to all of the questions that we just walked through. Notice that each of the 5 components of implementation fidelity are represented in the columns of the checklist. We have program components, specific features, adherence, quality, and responsiveness. Also, notice that each of the specific features describe the aspect of the programming that will provide students opportunities to meet the objectives or opportunities to learn. For instance, to help students meet the second objective, which is to show a 3-drink weekly decrease in drinking quantity from pre-test to post-test, facilitators plan to do several things, including reviewing the peak BAC info from the personalized feedback report, reviewing the perception of drinking norms from the personalized feedback report. Students are also expected to complete a 2-week drinking log, and then facilitators are reviewing this log with the students to help them develop a realistic action plan for future alcohol use. You can see that each of these components or specific features of the program should help students achieve Objective 2. You can also see how the checklist describes these program features in detail and aligns them with appropriate objectives. To complete implementation fidelity checklists, we have a few options. First, we could participate in the live programming and fill out the checklist as we experience the programming in real time. Alternatively, we could watch a videotaped version of the programming and fill out the checklist just as if we had experienced the programming in real time. It's important that the videotaped version of the programming includes scenes of the participants throughout the programming so we can rate or gauge participant responsiveness. Another option is to use program materials such as curriculum maps, PowerPoint slides, or activities to fill out the implementation fidelity checklist. We should note that the first method will provide the most valid implementation fidelity data, while the later method will provide weaker validity. We also have several options when it comes to deciding who will fill out the implementation fidelity checklist and actually collect this valuable information. First, independent auditors that are not directly involved with the programming could complete the implementation fidelity checklist. Second, the program facilitators or implementers could fill out the checklist immediately after they finish implementing the program. Lastly, the participants or the students could fill out the implementation fidelity checklist once they've completed the programming. There may be situations in which you are concerned about the validity of implementation fidelity ratings, and in these cases you may choose to corroborate your findings by collecting information from multiple sources. We'd like to end this presentation with a brief overview of implementation fidelity. As we've discussed, implementation fidelity helps us determine how and to what extent our planned programming differs from the programming that was actually implemented. This is crucial information that we must have in order to make appropriate decisions about our programming. Also, we discussed and defined the 5 components of implementation fidelity, which include program differentiation, adherence, quality, exposure, and responsiveness. Lastly, we discussed the implementation fidelity checklist, how to create it, and how to fill it out. This concludes the presentation on implementation fidelity. Thank you for your time and attention.